The FedEx Air Ground Fantasy Preview is back. In case it slipped your mind, NFL football fans have the opportunity to vote on top performers at the running back and quarterback position following every regular week of action. The candidates at quarterback last season ranged from underdogs like Trevor Siemian Week 3 to the more obvious guys like Aaron Rodgers, but at the end of the year Matt Ryan took home the annual honors overall. At running back, Rob Kelly, Latavius Murray and Jay Ajayi were all featured week winners, but at the end of the year, the league's leading rusher, Ezekiel Elliott, took home the honors. So without further ado, let's dive into some players who could have huge weeks in their respective season openers, both through the air and on the ground. Air analysis. Sam Bradford vs. Saints. Bradford is an obvious pick this week in a Monday night game against the Saints. Maybe you've seen the gazillion articles about Ole Sam as an ideal streaming option for Week 1. The Saints, as you probably know, have owned one of the worst defenses in the NFL for a few seasons now. Last year, they had a lot of trouble stopping outside receivers. Per Next Gen Stats, New Orleans allowed a 101.2 passer rating to receivers lined up wide last year, third worst mark in the league. Bradford should thrive on his targets to a healthy Stephon Diggs, who the Vikings will reportedly use more on the outside than they did last year. The third-year receiver hauled in 52% of his receptions from slot lineups last year. Diggs was already a prime breakout candidate before this move outside, and now that he'll be taking more of his snaps wide, he is poised for some huge plays on his home turf in Week 1. Another favorable factor for Bradford is Diggs' ability to create separation on deep passes 20 yards or more. The promising receiver had the fourth highest separation on passes of this type last season, a 2.6-yard average compared to the 1.9-yard league average. And if you're worried about pass protection given Minnesota's offensive line struggles last year, rest assured Bradford should be just fine there. On his throws from outside the pocket last season, the veteran quarterback led the league with a 126.3 passer rating on his 40 attempts from outside the pocket. As good as it gets, too. Detroit sported the NFL's 28th or worst defense last season in the following categories: third down 31st, sacks 30th, turnovers 28th and red zone 30th. Palmer is about as safe a play as they come in Week 1. Ground analysis. Todd Gurley vs. Colts. It seems like forever ago that Todd Gurley was an intimidating running back to face in your fantasy football matchup. Really, it was only 2 seasons ago, his rookie year, in which he racked up 10 rushing touchdowns, over 1,100 yards on the ground and averaged 4.8 yards per carry. Because of that eye-opening rookie season, Gurley was a first-rounder in fantasy drafts ahead of the 2016 season. In his last 24 starts though, he has just a single 100-yard rushing game and averaged 3.2 yards per carry last year. That was the absolute worst mark in the entire NFL last year among back who had at least 150 attempts. Long story short, Gurley is one of the league's premier talents at running back, but landed in a less than ideal situation a season ago. If there's one positive stat to come from Gurley's mediocre 2016 performance, it's that 66.3% of his rushing yards came after contact, the highest mark in the league. Dude can break tackles, elude defenders and slip away from contact, but he was hammered behind the line of scrimmage more often than not. With an upgraded defense to work in this year, Gurley's fantasy football comeback campaign begins in Week 1 against Indianapolis. The Colts had the third worst total defense in the NFL a season ago. Opposing running backs destroyed Indy's defense from a fantasy perspective as the unit allowed 21.3 standard fantasy points per game to the position, 6th worst. With a completely retooled defense, the Rams have a cake matchup to kick the season off, and should dominate time of possession if nothing else, against a turnover-prone Scott Holtzian under center for Indy. There's no doubt Gurley will be a top 10 fantasy runner at week's end. Dalvin Cook vs. Saints. The Saints' defense is easy to pick on, hence all the Vikings love. That's why in his NFL debut, Dalvin Cook could put up week-winning type numbers to seal the deal for fantasy owners on Monday night. The Vikings finished 2016 with the lowest-ranked rushing attack in the league, so they went out and added Latavius Murray in free agency and drafted Dalvin Cook out of Florida State. Cook was the featured primary runner with the first-team offense throughout the preseason as the team groomed him to be their high-volume starter to open the season. Murray, on the other hand, admitted he was behind the 8 ball in training camp as he recovered from off-season ankle surgery. Cook is a complete, three-down back as showcased in the preseason action, and you can bet that Minnesota will take advantage of a Saints defense that allowed a league-worst 873 receiving yards to running backs last season. It's a matchup made in heaven for Minnesota's offense on several fronts here. Pencil Cook in as a guaranteed RB1 on Monday night. A fantasy preview you can count on. Just like FedEx Ground, fast and affordable shipping you can count on. NFL fantasy season is here. Get in on the fun and join our Creator League for free. Follow Matt on Twitter @MattFranchise, on Instagram @MattFranchise, and like his page on Facebook.